Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be going over is my updated 2020 Senate prediction. So since my last prediction, a lot of things have happened. A lot of debates have, occurred. A lot of primaries have occurred where we have a general understanding of who the candidates are and generally how Poland has shaped up many of these races. So what I'm going to go through is basically my personal predictions if the election were to be held today, which is September 15th, 2020. So, looking at the current map, this is not necessarily a great news for Republicans. A lot of formerly safe Republican states are in play in this map, which is really only supposed to favor Republicans in a huge way. I mean, back in 2014, the GOP picked a lot of seats from the Democrats, picking up states in, states that are typically trending more Republican, like Louisiana or Arkansas. So the fact that they are still, able to potentially lose quite a few seats this time around is pretty significant. So looking at the safe states, for the Republicans, I think Idaho's safe, along with Wyoming, South Dakota, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, and West Virginia. Previously, I believe I had West Virginia as a likely state, despite the fact that I think that Paula Jean Swearengin is a decent candidate for the Democrats and might appeal more to the populism that West Virginians typically seem to enjoy. I don't think she's going to be able to crunch it under 15 percentage points. Yeah, and looking at the state Democratic states, Oregon's pretty tough. I think that on the presidential level, it's actually probably going to be likely if the election were held today. Oregon only went to Hillary Clinton by, I think, 11 points back in 2016. And Joe Biden probably will improve on her margins, but not by too much. But however, I think the Senate candidate here, I think it's Jeff Merkley. He'll probably outperform Joe Biden. I think Dick Durbin in Illinois will also win by a safe margin. Delaware and New Jersey, I think they would both go to the Democratic candidates there by pretty safe margins. Delaware, their primary is tomorrow. It's one of the only states where we do not have these set candidates. However, it is likely going to, stay, I think, with Tom Carper. Massachusetts, a contested Democratic primary here, still going to be safe, along with the state of Rhode Island. And I think that's about it. Actually, no, the state of Virginia is also going to be safe. This might seem a little controversial, but back in 2014, when there was a Republican wave year, Republicans picked up seats in Colorado. That's insane. And they were competitive in many other states as well. But Virginia still stayed Democratic. And in the past few elections, Virginia's been going even more Democratic, going by safe margins to the Democrats. And even though Joe Biden might win it by a likely margin, I think Mark Warner is going to make a complete blowout in this state. The Republicans have not necessarily fielded a great candidate here. So, yeah, this brings it up to the Democrats having a lead before the somewhat competitive states, and the Republicans having 39. So, yeah, now we're going to go on to the likely Republican states. The first state is Kansas. So I think originally, if Chris Kobach were to be the nominee, he definitely probably would have lost to Barbara Boyer. Not by a huge margin, but still he probably would have lost. However, Barbara Boyer still is keeping it close in polling. However, it is the state of Kansas. And despite the fact that she is probably going to outperform Joe Biden, especially with her fundraising numbers, it's absolutely insane the amount of money that she's been able to raise there. But I think that this is a pretty solidly Republican state and will stay within party lines. I also think the state of Kentucky is going to be a likely state, mirroring a safe margin. It's going to be really hard for Amy McGrath to try and win this state, especially when she's she's more Trump than Mitch McConnell, which I definitely think will turn off a lot of typical Democratic voters. Might bring a couple of maybe disenfranchised Trump voters, or I don't know entirely what her tactic is, but it doesn't seem like it's working too well. However, Mitch McConnell is pretty well disliked. So that might bring down the margins a little bit, but it's getting closer to a safe state the more and more we get to the actual election. The next likely state is the state of Alaska. So Dan Sullivan, the current Republican candidate here, pretty close in polling. However, it is really hard to poll the state of Alaska. It's a very large state, very unpredictable. It has a pretty strong independent movement here. Well, not for Alaskan independence, but they typically seem to vote for third parties in pretty big margins. However, Al Gross, pretty well unknown. I think he's endorsed by like Andrew Yang and Pete Buttigieg. However, I don't think that's going to resonate too much with Alaskan voters. However, anything can still happen. Alaska probably going to be between 5 and 10 percentage points, in my opinion, on election day if it were held today. However, there still is 2 months, and definitely a lot can still change. The next likely Republican states are the states of Mississippi and Alabama. So I think that Alabama, Doug Jones, the current Democratic incumbent, is probably going to lose by a lot, and if anything, probably over 10 points. It's going to be very difficult for a Democrat in the state of Alabama to even get it under 15 points. And the fact that he was able to win back in 2017 was somewhat of a fluke. It was generally due to the fact that he was running against a child predator as the Republican candidate, and if Alabamans were to not vote for Doug Jones, it kind of would have sent shockwaves and would really disenfranchise a lot of Republican voters all across this country. It wouldn't necessarily make them not want to vote. However, they would definitely be turned off by the party leaders that would have supported a candidate like that. And in the state of Mississippi, Mike Epps and Cindy Hyde-Smith, their rematch, I think is probably going to go around the same margins. If anything, Cindy Hyde-Smith will improve on her margins. I think it's going to be in line with Joe Biden's margins, staying within party lines overall. So I believe those are all out. The state of Texas. Again, probably pretty competitive on the presidential level. One of the only states that Joe Biden's probably going to outperform the senators' margins in these states. However, John Cornyn running against MJ Hagar running against John Cornyn. He's pretty popular in the state of Texas. Not a Beto O'Rourke type candidate. No disrespect to MJ Hagar, but I think it's going to be very difficult for the Democrats to try to flip it. And if anything, it's probably going to go to the John Cornyn by about 10 points on election day. So, yeah. So those are all of the likely Republican states. Now we're going to look at the likely Democratic states. So the state of New Mexico, in my opinion, is going to be probably a likely state for the Democrats. Generally, I think it is going to be under 15 points, pretty close to that 15-point margin. However, in recent polling, Ben Ray Lujan hasn't been doing super great against Mark Ronchetti. I know he's a weather forecaster in the state of New Mexico. I don't think the Republicans are going to do so great in this state. Potentially Joe Biden would outperform Ben Ray Lujan, but you never know. When it comes to the states of Arizona and Colorado, they're very difficult states to try and make predictions about. However, I do think the state of Arizona is going to be likely. This might seem a little crazy. However, current polling, Fox News, a bunch of different polling sites have consistently had Mark Kelly with over a 5-point lead. And in some cases, I think he had one where he was up 19 points. He was up 12 points. He has really been outperforming the Democratic margins here that are expected. And, this is formerly a state that went to Mitt Romney and John McCain by double digits. And the fact that he hasn't been able to, Martha McSally hasn't been able to replicate that is quite a sign that this state is definitely trending more and more blue. They are running a candidate who did lose back in 2018. And, someone who lost before is not going to have a good track record of trying to winning again. So yeah, the next likely state, in my opinion, is going to be the state of Michigan. I think that Gary Peters, despite some polls showing it pretty close. I think one even had John James leading. John James, if he does win this race, he's going to be a superstar for the Republican Party. I think that he potentially may have a presidential run in the books for 2024. And I think that generally this is a state where it can get a little bit more competitive, and it has been a bit more competitive in recent years. However, Gary Peters, pretty well liked back in 2014, won by double digits. I don't think he'll win by such a great margin this time around due to the fact that Michigan definitely has been changing a lot. The suburbs have been changing. The rural areas have been changing. So I think he probably will win between 5 and 9 percentage points, in my own opinion. I also think the state of New Hampshire will be a likely state for the Democrats. I think that, if anything, New Hampshire on the presidential level is closer to a lean, if anything. However, Jeanne Shaheen, no real strong Republican challenger. She's leading them by double digits, sometimes even by 20 points in recent polling. I don't think it's going to be going to her by 20 points. However, she is probably going to win by a lead that's going to be insurmountable for any Republican challenger to really take her over. I think that if Chris Sununu were to run again for Senate, he might actually have a chance. But of course, his time has come, and he's running for governor instead, where he's likely going to win. Yeah, and I think that's about it for likely Democratic states. So for the lean Republican states, there are a couple. The state of South Carolina, I think that is going to be a lean Republican state. Lindsey Graham and Jamie Harrison, between recent polls, they've been pretty close. Either they're tied. Lindsey Graham was a small lead. I haven't seen any with Jamie Harrison leading. However, I definitely think that the Republicans are going to start focusing on this race. And, the Republicans are going to start taking notice that the Democrats' battleground map just keeps expanding, especially in the Senate. Maybe not on the presidential level, but in the Senate, there are a lot of seats that previously went to Republicans by double-digit margins, and now the Democrats are in play. And Jamie Harrison has been raising a crazy amount of money, and Lindsey Graham is the person who did get Trump to talk with Bob Woodward, so maybe some Republicans may be angry at him for that, and for the general way that he did talk about Trump in the past. The Republican Party has been kind of a party closely tied to Trump, and anyone who's not necessarily loyal to him is probably going to get voted out. This has happened in many congressional races all across the country, and I think that may, be prevalent here too. Now, we're going to go to the state of Georgia. So I think that both of their races currently are lean for the Republicans. I think that if the Democrats had a better shot at one, I think it would be Georgia's regular election, John Ossoff, the former special election candidate and a congressional seat, who lost. So, running a losing candidate is not exactly the best idea. However, Georgia has been trending more and more blue, even in 2016. And definitely, I think that the Democrats are going to try to make a play for winning here. I'm not sure they're actually going to be able to land. And even in the Georgia special election, I think the Republicans are probably going to have two candidates going into the special election with Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler. Yeah, so those are all of the lean Republican states. Now we're going to go on to the lean Democratic states. So the state of Minnesota, I think personally, is going to be lean. Previously, I had Minnesota as likely or even safe in my previous videos, but I think that Minnesota has been trending more and more Republican, and a lot of Democrats are afraid to kind of admit this, but in 2018, there were 2 Republican pickups in the House in total, and they were both in the state of Minnesota. I mean, there were also 2 Democratic pickups, showing how the rural areas of, Minnesota have definitely been changing and have kind of been, the Democrats have been improving in some areas, the Republicans have been improving in some areas. But I think the state of Minnesota, if anything, Trump could probably focus on it and potentially even win the state of Minnesota. I think that could be a plausible surprise in November. However, Tina Smith, she did win back in 2018 by a lesser margin than her senior senator, Amy Klobuchar. And I think she's probably going to win closer to 5 points, but I'm not sure if she's going to be able to hit it if the election were held today. What's next? State of Colorado. So, again, another weird state. Previously, I had this as likely. Recent polling has had it actually pretty close. And I think that despite the fact that Cory Gardner is pretty well disliked, so is John Hickenlooper in this state. He has had numerous allegations come out against him. And it's going to be very difficult for him to try to win. Yeah. And Cory Gardner has definitely been spending a lot of money in this race. Like an insane amount of money, too. So the Republicans are really worried about losing that. I also think the state of North Carolina is going to be lean. Going to be very difficult for the Republicans to win. Especially with Cal Cunningham running up the margins of these states. Yeah. Now for the tilt Republican states, I think the state of Iowa is going to be a tilt margin for the Republicans, along with Montana. I think Steve Daines and Steve Bullock, one of the closest races of the night. I think it's really hard for me to actually make even a call at this point. However, I just think it's going to lean for Daines, if anything, if the election were held today. Joni Ernst and Teresa Greenfield. Joni Ernst, I'm just giving her the edge because Iowa is likely to go to Trump. However, they could potentially cross-ticket or split-ticket voting. In the state of Maine, I think the debate maybe helped Sarah Gideon a little bit. However, it may have helped Susan Collins a bit. Very, very close race. I think Lisa Savage might take more from Sarah Gideon, especially during ranked choice voting, which may not necessarily help her. But, even if it were to, take votes away from Sarah Gideon, they could eventually just go back to her. So I think ranked choice voting in here is probably going to happen because I don't think either candidate is going to reach 50%. And I think Sarah Gideon is going to come on top just by a very narrow margin. So yeah, this is my total 2020 Senate prediction. It's a tie between the Republicans and the Democrats. I think we will have a Vice President Harris if the election were held today, casting the deciding vote if there were to be a tie in a vote. But yeah, this is my general election prediction for the Senate. I hope you guys like this video. Please like and subscribe, comment suggestions down below. Thank you.